Mr. President, Senator Harms would move that Legislative Bill 415 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Harms, you are recognized to open on your motion to override the veto.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. Today I'm asking you to support my request to override the veto of the Governor on LB 415 and 1451A. First, I want to say very clearly that I'm not here to attack the Governor. I'm not here to say bad things about the Governor, nor am I in that frame of mind at all. What I'm here to talk to you about is the fact that this bill saved teenagers' lives, and the fact that he's vetoed it, the fact that he's taken a position in that manner, I think is wrong. I'm not arguing about the Governor. I'm arguing about the fact the position he's taken. I think it's wrong. I think it hurts our teenagers, and I don't think it's appropriate. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is this is a defining moment this session. This is the beginning of other vetoes that are going to come. We have to decide as colleagues, we have to decide as senators whether or not we're going to allow this to happen, whether or not we're going to stand up excuse me, for what we believe. And this is the day that I think we need to do that. I'm going to give it to you by the numbers, and then I'm going to take his letter, and I'm going to dissect that letter, and I'm going to show you the data and the statistics of where he is wrong. First, let me give you the numbers again. According to the Nebraska Office of the Highway Safety, teen drivers in Nebraska represents 8% of licensed drivers, yet they were involved in 26% of all reported crashes, 31% of all crashes between 9 p.m. and midnight, 21% of all crashes between midnight and 3 a.m., 46% of crashes in which speed was a major factor, 30% of all single vehicle rollovers were crashes. You tell me we don't have a problem? We do have a problem, and it's one that we need to say we're no longer going to tolerate. We need to set the standards, and what we have heard and what the Governor has said to us is that maybe our standards are too high. They cannot be too high when it comes to this. We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility here to protect the very future, and that's our teenagers. They are not capable in this program in early driving experiences to be able to separate out cell phones and speed. They're not there, they're not mature enough, and what I'm asking for us, and what we said before, we want to set the standards. We want to tell our students this is wrong. Now let me talk to you a little bit about his letter. In his first paragraph, he talks about interactive wireless communication, and he argues that this is a secondary offense. If you remember as a body, we had that debate on this floor. And I didn't understand Senator Erdman's comment earlier because I had some difficulty hearing at times. And I said quickly that it's primary. And that's what my intent was to be primary. But this body said we do not want primary. We want it to be secondary. And we agreed upon that. And I said I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to take that on and say it's okay because it sets the standard. It sets the course. Now we're confronted by the Governor saying to you, as my colleagues, you were wrong. This is ridiculous. We can't enforce this. Well, you told me is where we want to be. And I agreed with that, and I believe that's the reason why we ought to overturn this. In his second paragraph, he talks about the fact that we are substituting the wisdom and judgment and responsibility of parents with that of the state government. Hey, folks, why do you think we need this legislation? Let me give you some other facts here. Do you realize that we're #1 in the nation in underage drinking? Do you realize that this city is #1 in the nation in binge drinking? Do you realize that we are at the bottom of how we view our standards with young teenagers and driver's license? All of that deals with parental control. All that deals with parental support here. That's what is wrong. We've lost control. There are many parents who do a wonderful job with their children. But I'm here to tell you that's not happening in a majority of households. We do not have that opportunity. And this is a chance for us to set those standards. This is a chance for us to say, folks, we have to have these rules and these regulations. We're not infringing ourselves on parents. I've had parents call me since this veto's taken place. My cell phone has rung off the hook all night long saying they are shocked and appalled that this has been vetoed. that they are glad that someone has, as a body, has stood up and said, we want these standards, because, quite frankly, it's easier for them to say to their children, you can't do it, it's against the law. In the third paragraph, he talks about interactive wireless communications. This case distracts drivers, exists. He talks about the very fact that we should do it. We shouldn't pick out teenagers. We should do it for everyone. Well, I'll tell you what, if we want to do it for everyone, let's pass a bill and send it to the governor, and let's ask him whether or not he wants to do this. He'll veto that. Do you realize that 37% of all accidents that occur in Nebraska are caused from teenagers being involved with a cell phone, being involved in communicating with their friends? And not only that, the licensed drivers from 16 to 19 years of age only make up 7% of the drivers, yet 37% of the accidents that we have with teenagers are called from cell phones. And when you talk to the folks in law enforcement, they'll tell you this is the most underestimated or underreported reason for accidents, because most teens and most adults do not want to admit they were on their cell phone. Do you realize, folks, that we lose 35 to 40 deaths a year in teenager deaths? Do you want to, next time you open up the paper, and if this veto stands, do you want to read that and say, you know what? We had a chance to correct this. We had a chance to make a difference here. This is about saving kids' lives. It's not about politics. It's not about who talked to you. It's not about the fact that you're a Democrat or Republican or whether you like me or you don't like me. It's about kids. It's about teenagers. It's about saving their lives. And that's what this legislation is about. And if you walk away from this, gosh, folks, what a disappointment that's going to be. Not only for us as a body, but for teenagers. Let me give you some new statistics. This comes from the Nebraska Office of Highway Safety. It says teen drivers were involved in 181 fatal crashes from 2002 through 2005. Those crashes killed, and listen to this, those crashes killed 168 teens and 40 other people. Don't you think it's time that we say this is wrong? Don't you think it's time that we stand up and say we want to correct this issue? Don't you think it's time to say that we want the standards that are important? Don't we want to give the parents some help and some assistance? This veto takes that away. And in the final conversation, and in his letter, he talks about that the 6-month restriction of provisional operators puts a hardship on families. Folks, this is not forever. What are we talking about here? This is for what, 6 months? Or maybe a year? That's all. It's not a hardship. In fact, if it saved my child's life, I wouldn't care if it was 2 years. That's the very point. And the point here is that for every teenager you have in a car, it doubles the issue of having an accident, bringing death. And some statistics show it adds 300% chance of having further accidents when you load that car up with teenagers. That's why it's so important to introduce this legislation. That's why it was so important when we argued and debated in general and select. And we approved this with 32 votes. I'm asking you now to stand up in what you believe. I'm asking you not to do this because you're a Republican or Democrat or because you like the governor. I'm asking you to dig down deep from your heart. I'm asking you to say enough is enough. We're going to override this veto. We're going to make every attempt to save the lives of our teenagers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Harms. Senator Harms would like to recognize a guest located under the north balcony, Mark Masterston from Scottsbluff County. Would you please rise and be welcomed, and welcome to the legislature.
Members of the legislature, again, I stand in harm's way. There are a number that I believe will also be a part of the way. that will follow me, and I may be the only one to speak in opposition of this motion to override. As we found out with an earlier bill this legislative session, you have to analyze what you believe the legislature will pass and then what the governor will do in any bill. In the previous legislation that was brought to us by Senator Engel, he took a calculated risk to accept an amendment, and the governor vetoed the bill. Any bill that is brought before this legislature, the introducer and the proponents have an opportunity to decide whether they want to accept an amendment. But also within that process is the governor's opinion, because the bill cannot become law without going to the governor for his recommendation, and his recommendation is no. If you want to make this a grander display than it is, go for it. This is not about the two authorities being challenged. This is not about the legislature standing up to the governor and telling him where to go. This is about whether or not we believe this is the right public policy for the state of Nebraska. Senator Harms had 32 votes on final reading to make it the law of the land. I voted no. I'm still no. I didn't convince the governor to take his position, and he didn't convince me to take mine. But I do still believe, even with the bill as it is, that it is problematic. Now, I don't know how to take some of the last comments Senator Harms made, that I believe his comments referred to the total number of accidents that were caused by teenagers in the state of Nebraska. I believe his earlier comments were more narrow, that dealt just with cell phones, if I heard him correctly. If you're going to apply the last part of that there were over 200 accidents or 100 and some individuals who were killed in accidents regarding teenagers and 41 adults, then we should be banning teenagers from driving. That's not what Senator Harms is talking about in this bill. So out of respect to him, I would hope that we would talk about the issue, because I think that muddies the water. I think he has strong points. I think his data will prove what he wants it to say, not what he wants it to say, but what supports the position he's trying to get you to adopt. I fundamentally disagree with this rule. And I will object again today, as I did on select file, as I did on general file, that if Senator Harms wants to make the accusation that anybody that votes against this bill or opposes this bill doesn't care about the lives of those young people, that is irresponsible. Senator Harms will have his opportunity here to override the governor's veto. And based on the votes on final reading, he's probably got a pretty good shot at it. Because he got 32 on final reading, there were 14 people who didn't vote. There were only 5 who voted no. Only 5. So to the extent that I need to be lectured about whether or not I care for young people, I don't. But to the extent that you believe this is the right public policy for the state of Nebraska, go for it. Press green. You want to stick it to the governor? Press green. You think this is the right public policy? Press green. There are good reasons to vote for this bill. But in my opinion, those reasons are not sufficient to allay my concerns. I'm interested in seeing what the body will do. I think if I were in Senator Harms' position, I would be doing the exact same thing. Maybe not the same way, but I'd be doing the exact same thing. If I felt strongly enough about my bill that I believed it was the best public policy for the state of Nebraska, I would file the same motion he did. That's what the checks and balances are about. And to stand up and say that people are outraged with the governor, they can be outraged with the governor all day. They're probably going to be outraged with the governor again this session. They're going to be outraged with us. But it is about the checks and balances, and this debate is narrowly drawn to the discussion about whether LB 415, in the form that it was passed by this legislature, is good public policy. It is not. And it is not good public policy, in my opinion, not because I don't care about those young people, but because, as I said earlier in this debate, there has to be a balancing act. And to cast the brush that all young people in this state are irresponsible is not true, or that they're not prepared is untrue. Senator Harms, I wish you well. But as you can imagine, I'll be voting no. I would imagine all the other speakers that I've heard will be voting yes. We'll see where we're at. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. Just a couple of things I just wanted to make sure as a body you understand is that this bill is not designed to punish our young people. It's dealing with the fact that they are inexperienced. And I want you to understand that. It's the fact that they're inexperienced, they're in an automobile, they do not have the driving skills, and that's what this bill is about. So don't misunderstand it. I've had some folks say, well, I think you're punishing them. No, that has nothing to do with punishment. It's the fact that they're inexperienced. We're trying to protect them, and we're trying to save their lives. The other thing I would like to address is some comments that Senator Erdman made. And I just want to clarify this so that he understands, because we're at different parts of the poll here, because I stand up and I speak passionately about something I believe in. That's my nature. It's not lecturing. And for every time we would disagree on this floor, are we going to say, don't lecture to me? It has nothing to do with it. The issue really is what we're talking about. You have to have some passion and you have to care. And it's not about whether you care or not. It's just philosophically we're not at the same pole. So I am not lecturing to you, Senator Erdman, and I'm not lecturing to anyone. I just have some strong views about this legislation, and I think it's critical for our teenagers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I'd respectfully call the question.
To restate, as I did earlier, this has nothing to do in regard to what I think of the governor or anything else. It just is the decision that he made that I do not agree with. And I think this issue is so vitally important that we override. And it's all about safety. It's all about teenagers' lives. It's all about what I think is so vitally important. And I would just ask, as you think about this, I would ask that you reach down deep. I would ask for you to think in your own heart about what is right. This is what we're talking about, is what is right. What's the right public policy? This is what it's about. It's about public policy. And I would just urge you to vote with me to override. You've heard all the debates. You've heard all the arguments. We've gone through select. We've gone through general, select, and now to override this veto. Nothing's changed. I just hope that I can encourage you to reach down and make the right decision. And, Mr. President, I'd like to request a call of the House, please.
33 A's, 7 A's, Mr. President, on the motion that Legislative Bill 415 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. LB 415 does become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.